Hey everyone. So my name is Beattie, and I'm an Agile coach and a DevOps transformation and innovation delivery lead at Agile by Design. And I'm also a proud stream owner and a member of the steering committee at ACE, a community of machine learning practitioners and researchers who have gathered around topics in AI research, engineering, and products. We offer free live sessions like this 3 to 5 times a week and produce premium content in various subject areas. To see more, visit https:// AI.science, so AI.science, and log in to access slides from this and other sessions and many more. Also, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, ML Papers Explained, to get notified about all the live sessions and other free content that we publish. So we have about 14 different streams that are focused on various ML topics, and this section is in the AI and product stream. So really, really excited to hear about AI and product from Nico. So today I'm excited to host Nico Gonzalez, a longtime friend of mine from like 2013, when our innovation journeys, we were just kind of beginning. So Nico's formal bio, I'll read it right now. Is that he's a futurist and a creative innovator. Nico's biggest passion lies in helping organizations accelerate their journey to becoming forward-looking ecosystems that value human-first behaviors, innovation, and agility through thoughtful design of organizational change. He is an avid lifelong learner and knowledge leader in the areas of validated learning, corporate innovation, and scaling agile. He has helped countless organizations, including Fortune 100 companies, public sector, and scaling startups, helping these people materialize big ideas into tangible business value. He also holds an MBA from the Rodman School of Management, an MESC in Computer Engineering, as well as a BESC in Comp Eng, and a BSc in Comp Sci from Western University. Nico, that's a lot of education. I guess it's been like what? It's been like 8 years. I got to know Nico as part of Agile by Design, where he's the head of applied innovation, and we've worked together on quite a few things, and he's really something else when it comes to understanding the human factors in design. And I'm really looking forward to today's glorious conversation. And the reason why I'm doing that is because, well, I kind of know what the content is, and I know you're in for a treat. And so today we're going to hear a little bit about AI design sprints and taking a more human-oriented approach and setting up your AI initiatives for success. So really looking forward to this great conversation. So you know what, Nico, why don't you take it away? Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for the amazing intro, Ashley, and welcome everybody. I'm very excited to join you guys. So Ashley and I were talking about, wouldn't it be really cool to kind of introduce a little bit of how do we take a lot of different tools and processes that we've introduced in different talks and organize them in a way that we can understand and have a bit of a design-oriented perspective on how do we build AI products. So we call the AI design sprint, but the interesting thing is that after thinking about this, we realized that realistically, this is more of a product learning flow process. So surprise, the talk is actually called the AI product learning flow, where we will be talking a little bit about how do we leverage human-centric and agile techniques to create those AI products that actually have business value. So I wanted to anchor everything and start with, if we look into industry right now and look at where the most traction some of these AI projects have had is actually leveraging AI for human complementation and augmentation rather than replacement, right? And this has been proven by many different articles. You guys can Google some of these. I just posted some of these here as reference, but it is where we leverage AI as a component to augment ourselves rather than try to replace us, where we have actually found the most traction, the most business value. What this translates to is that we should definitely start with the human, right? We should start thinking about, is this something that a human would want to actually use? So creating human-centric solutions is nothing new. Like, we've done this for a couple decades now. It's just like not everybody necessarily follows it. And I wanted to just put a lens in terms of, as we think about an AI human-centric approach, let's think about how do we borrow some tools and techniques from things like design thinking, user-centric design, agile, lean startup, and how do we bring that into an actual process that helps us say, am I solving a real problem for an actual user that's willing to take this into their ring and either pay for it, use it, etc. So this is a product human-centric delivery process. This is kind of the approach that we tend to take with our clients and the way that we always look at things. And we start with the very first question of, do I have enough insight and idea of who my actual customer and my user is, right? So immediately I have to ask a question to myself: have I immersed myself into the customer's environment? Do I know what their real pain points are? Do I know what they go through? Do I know who they are, right? Once I have that, is that I can say, hey, there's an opportunity here. Maybe I can actually come up with an idea to solve a problem. And before I start actually coding, why don't I take a look to see if this is viable? And when I mean viable, is there a business model or a value model behind this idea that would actually have interest from a business perspective? Validating that model is what we call the value model validation, which is like, do I have a reasonable and research around my business model? I understand different dimensions around it. These are light exercises. And it's only then that I jump into understanding my customer fit. So that leads to an actual initiative that I can say, okay, I'm going to try this out. And in customer fit, the idea is that I want to collaborate with real users, with real people, who would be the actual user that would take that particular idea and use it in at the end of the day, and leverage very fast prototyping and even non-coding approaches to validate, hey, this is something that would actually, that the user would buy. Once I have that validation, I can go into customer traction. And this is where now I actually, roll up my sleeves. I start going in through like my actual models, my implementations. What are my MVPs? How do I segment my data to start to create initial value for certain areas or simplify the problem? But now I am actually validating that traction that I initially hypothesized and kind of very lightly tested. And go into an actual MVP that I will build and deploy with the smallest possible solution. Once I have that, I go into a scaling process. Scaling is actually one of the biggest challenges in a lot of not only startups but also within organizational projects. And it's now I need to actually think, how do I validate outcomes? And I think about now very focused towards like, how do I scale my product? In ML is like, how do I think about those thorny edge cases? How do I really now think about wide audiences and make this available for everybody? So a whole other set of challenges that I now need to think of. So I wanted to just show you guys this, and it's more of a takeaway for you to go into detail, but foundationally it's just some key activities that I can take throughout each one of the stages. And also, this is a little bit of a tool set that you can think about when you're going through some of these areas and kind of think about, as I'm doing idea and insight, there's tons of different tools that you can use. Value model, same thing, customer fit, traction, et cetera, et cetera. But what I wanted to really focus on in this talk is that when we tend to work with new and exciting technologies, we get that shiny object effect. And it's like, I know the solution is always AI. I'm just going to build it right now. And we kind of tend to go ignore a little bit the whole area of understanding the customer, understanding even the value model and the customer fit. And I jump into, let me just build an MVP. I'm just going to code. I'm just going to, get me some data. I'm going to do some immediate product that I'm going to just put out there. And the challenge with that is that a lot of times, as we know, AI being a new space and exponential technology tends to have a lot of great opportunities and great black holes. So it's more, can we, rather than just immediately jump in there, take a little bit of a step back and look at, okay, very quickly and with light frame models, let's start with incident idea, value model, and customer fit, and go back into like, okay, now does it make sense to solve this? Is it even solvable through AI? And you'll be surprised that a lot of times, AI may actually not be the solution. It may be something much simpler. So we want to take some of the actual topics that my colleague Ashley has gone through and kind of consolidate them in a little bit of a flow and showcase some of the tools and how you would actually string them together. We'll go through what a design canvas can look like and what it is to tackle more of the insight and ideation stages. The value model, we'll chat about the AI canvas, the extended AI canvas. Ashley did a great talk in detail of what this entails and how to use it once again. The AI value model, which goes in pair with the AI canvas of like, what are the economics behind my AI solution? What kind of accuracy do I need to have in order for this solution to be economically viable? What are my confusion matrix inputs, the cost of a false positive, the cost of a false negative, et cetera? And we're going to pair that into an experimentation validation flow. I'll go into it in a little bit more detail, but it's basically what are some of those assumptions that I want to actually validate so that I de-risk the project and or product as much as possible. So the way that we tend to do this, I'm a big fan of Kanban, and for those of you that are familiar with it, it's basically a system of work that allows you to visualize things in a flow process. The way that this works is that we basically go from left to right. We bring a particular opportunity, idea, MVP, like whatever we want to call the pocket of work, and we kind of flow through it. In this particular case, for our AI learning flow, we think about an initial opportunity, and we'll start with like basically the approach of gathering insight. What I mean by that is that, hey, I'm just going to pick a random problem. Let's say, for instance, that there's a call center that has a massive amount of call volume. And I want to understand what can I do in order to help them alleviate this long lead times when picking up calls. As I mentioned before, a lot of times we would say, oh, I know what to do. I'm going to build AI that is going to solve it. But it's like, wait a second, can we take a look and go and actually sit down with the operators, listen to some calls, understand what the pain points are, what really is the issue that is driving to that pain point. So as I do this, I come up with experiments that would allow me to say, okay, let me go and observe who the user is, what is their actual environment and or flow journey, and synthesize some observations through what I like to call painstorming, so that I can say, hey, there's some opportunities in these particular areas, and then ideate solutions. This is basically what I'm doing in my instant ideation area of the flow, which is I'm going to gather some insight, which is go empathize, make sure that you actually connect with who the user is and understand their pain points, synthesize your observations into actual areas of value that you can say, hey, there's something here, and ideate a solution. Those solutions they're still ideas, they're hypotheses, right? So now I need to validate them. So that can potentially lead into an idea that has some level of value. So the first thing that I do with that idea is that I co-create a value model. And this is where I can leverage things like the AI canvas and the AI value model, given that it is an AI product, it may not be, or an AI solution. And what I can do here is that I can start creating different experiments that allow me to address certain types of assumptions that can carry high levels of risk. I'll showcase how that works as well. But it's basically, how do I take a look at some of the dimensions that I've identified in my AI canvas and say, these specific areas carry a lot of risk. I don't know if they are true. And generate very quick, fast experiments that allow me to gain enough understanding to see if I am still on the right track in my particular idea from a viability perspective. Once I have this, ultimately end up with an MVP idea or with a minimum viable product, something that I can say, hey, I can test this. But this is the kicker. I haven't even written a single line of code. In here, I can build prototypes. And these prototypes don't necessarily have to be code. They can be. And with today's tool set, we can do something very quickly from a machine learning perspective. But they don't necessarily have to be. It can just be Wizard of Oz implementations that I can go on, just validate that this is something that my customer wants, that my user wants. And just literally just be like, hey, look at this solution. And in the background is Ashley, typing away as you use a chatbot. So what this does is that it allows us to say, okay, I understand what the user pain points are. I understand what my value model is. And I have validated with some quick prototyping approaches that there is a viable and desirable solution behind this whole thing. So there's some key foundational mindsets for us to be effective at this, though. I just wanted to make sure that I put a caveat there. Especially in big organizations, this tends to be a challenge, but it is very important to have a dedicated team so that you have no part-time syndrome. The previous flow that I mentioned can be very quick, and it can be something that you can go through in a matter of days or even short weeks. But with part-time syndrome, it could take months, and it can actually extend to the point that it just makes no sense. Cross-functionality and pan-organizational teams, which means is that you want to have the mindset other than just dev. You want to have design, you want to have product. I've actually worked with teams that tend to have even psychologists within their team to have a bit of a human perspective behind their implementations. From a pan-organizational perspective is that leaders are a foundational part of your team as well. direct or indirect, having leadership support for something like this really transforms just something from being a shiny object that like, look at my innovation theater, to this is a valuable product that I am actually pursuing. Last but not least, the open mindset to experimentation is going to be key for you to be able to actually be open that AI may not be the solution. It may be something different that can take different shape. So just really be open to that. So when we start looking into the actual specific tool sets, inside Gather, inside Generate Idea, we talked about go and start with a human. So how do I set people at work? How do I drive those insights? And one of the tools that I'm actually quite a fan of, and I tend to use quite a bit with my teams, is like, let's start structuring what we know about our current user into a quick canvas, and co-create a research plan that allows us to go deeper into their problem space to identify those possible solutions. So a little bit self-explanatory. What is my design challenge? How might we blah to the user? How will we help support or enable our user to do something? What is the desired impact? And what are my possible solutions? Those three particular dimensions, plus who's my audience, some of the context and constraint, and the design team, allow me to create that research plan, which leads to the ideation around possible solutions. Once I have some possible solutions ideated and I have actually finalized or initialized, a cycle of research, I can start asking myself, are any members of the audience making a critical prediction? And is a prediction required as part of the possible solution? If those things are yes, then maybe machine learning may be a viable solution. If not, we can still take this and continue as like experimenting a different approach to solving the problem. Since a lot of times we tend to be very attracted to jump into ML, but it's just making sure that we link it to an actual pain point. So defining the value model, this is the process of actually saying, okay, we're going to deep dive into the viability and like what are the actual business risks and assumptions that I have cooked in within my idea, and start validating them. And to do this, we start by and this is key, the co-creation of the AI canvas. And when I say co-creation, is get your relevant stakeholders, get your cross-functional team, start filling this out, right? Ashley did a great session on like what the different components of this actually, like how to use it and how to interpret the different dimensions behind it. But ultimately what you want to do is that use different levels, colors of stickies or identifiers that will tell you, here are some things that I am very confident on. There's low uncertainty or low risk. Here's some things that I have some medium or some level of uncertainty or some level of risk. And here's some things that are actually risky. I'm making a wild assumption and saying like, I think this is the answer. And I'm just going to put it out there to validate sooner than later. With that, I can actually take some of those assumptions and start trying out my value model from an economic perspective. For this, we leverage a confusion matrix. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. It's basically identifying what are the costs of my false positives and false negatives. What is the impact of them? Therefore, I can actually determine what level of accuracy do I need to have within my model so that I can provide business value. And again, another call out to Ashley. He did a second amazing talk where he deep dive on the use of this particular model and how to tie things together. So it's basically connecting all these things into a uncertainty backlog and a validation flow where I can say, here's the highest risk assumptions that I have. I'm going to prioritize them in terms of impact. I'm going to create a small and quick plan and what can I address them, and go do very quick experiments that will give me learnings so that I can enhance my value model, I can enhance my AI canvas, and therefore continue the cycle into a point that I now feel a lot more comfortable saying, yes, this solution is not only viable, but it is something that we're interested in building and creating. Now, validating customer fit, I'm going to touch very lightly on this because the main part of this is that what we want to do is that we want to validate and evolve our initial ideas now with the customer in mind. And what I want to do is that I want to leverage a lot of co-creation with the user and or problem interviews. So go to the actual user and try to put things together very quickly, either rapid prototyping, a smoke test, right? Wizard of Oz, I'm hoping you guys are familiar, which is like the having someone behind the curtain faking to be your solution. Segment your actual sections into like, I'm just going to create a particular solution for a specific segment of my problem space, A/B testing and so on. There's plenty of different tools that you can use in order to validate this. But right now, the main thing is that what you want to do is that you want to start with a quick problem over interview, create that prototype, go and do that solution fit where you say like, here is my prototype. Very quickly, would you use it? What do you give me some feedback? And it's not just about the user experience. It's also about the feasibility and about the viability and desirability of your solution in terms of, is this something you would use? Or do you think this is going to displace you from your workplace, right? Because a lot of times AI products lose their attraction because people, even they might be fantastic, but people just, they won't use it. They just feel that it's more of a problem than a solution. So this point is where I could potentially, depending on the problem space, start with some very quick training sets and model solutions that can validate some of these things and some of the feasibility around the technical risk. However, it is more important to focus on the traction for the user, for the customer, so that you know that you are building something that ultimately, once released, you'll have traction. So I talked a lot. I wanted to save a little bit of time for a discussion with Ashley and a couple questions. In conclusion, start with the human. That's kind of the more important things. We tend to skip this step quite a bit. They're the users, so we need to craft a solution with them in mind. And the other one is focus on outcomes. It's interesting because even though I gave you guys a bit of a prescriptive process and, here's a bunch of tools, focus on what is the outcome, right? And you guys can customize your actual tool set. We just gave you a couple of particular examples of what you can do to validate some of this risk and assumption and to make sure that you can visualize it. But focus is in like, is this something that my user will care about? Is this something that carries business value? Is this something that I can actually build and create? So I want to close with a good old Dilbert. I'll let you guys read it in your own time, but I'll open it up for questions.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. This cartoon is hilarious. So while we're waiting for some of the questions to trickle in from the YouTube live stream, I might start with a couple of questions that came to me while you were talking. The first one relates to ethics and biases and some of those other thorny challenges that AI is going through right now. I'm hoping that you would take care of this, or you would start thinking about this before you build something. So like, where in the overall AI learning flow would something like bias or ethics play in?
That's a fantastic question, especially nowadays that AI solutions are being bombarded by, the importance of ethical solutions, the importance of traceability, the importance of different dimensions. But ethics will be something that, given the problem space, you would definitely identify within your AI canvas. I can go back to it really quickly, but there are dimensions within it that tackle some of the ethical questions inside this. From an outcomes perspective, the judgment area, in the decision factors, is there a heavy ethical piece in there that I need to make sure that I identify as a very high potential risk? If I am doing an automated loan approving system, do I have cooked-in bias within my existing data that I may not be aware of? Am I okay with using that as an actual public solution if I'm going to release that? So those are the things that I can immediately identify here. Even if they are things that I am unsure of, I can put that as a question mark and just create quick experiments around it and be like, can I validate this to see if this is indeed an actual problem or not? But that's a great question. I would definitely leverage the AI canvas to highlight these areas. Yeah.
Cool. All right, cool. Thank you. The other question that I have that, how will I say this, is more of like a strategic view, because what you've done is you've done a really good call it summarization and flowing together some of these more tactical elements. But let me pose you a bit of a strategic problem. Inevitably, you're going to come across a situation where the user really cares about this, but the business really doesn't care about this, i.e. there is a solution that, could be implemented with AI or not, and there's going to be a problem here, right? Because we aren't necessarily able to reconcile these two people, right? One is the user or the customer, another is like the business, the stakeholder. Like, what kind of guidance would you give in that kind of an example or that kind of case?
So that's a really good question. I think that there's two embedded kind of questions that I would ask you based on that. The first one is why doesn't the business care? So I would deep dive into that a little bit more. Is it that the viability is not there? Is it that I missed something when I was doing my assumptions and my assumption validation, that I am just not aware that the value is there, and I should go back to the drawing board? And it is okay to go back to the drawing board. It's better to go back now than 6 to 8 months later, where project just gets canceled or you run out of funding. So it's better to go now to validate that. The second one is that, which is actually interesting because I've observed this, is that when I talked about cross-functional teams with leadership support, this is actually something that can potentially happen in organizations, which is that a lot of times there's the shiny object effect, which is like, yeah, we're doing AI. And it is very important to have leadership support in terms of how am I aligning my specific solutions to the specific value proposition of the organization. What is the alignment there, so that I can actually have buy-in from leadership and have leadership back me up in terms of, if I find that my solution is actually that my customers want it, it makes money for the business, it makes sense, and ultimately it's profitable, I can do it, right? We have the technology, we can solve this. But all of a sudden, leaders are kind of like, yeah, not really, not interested. Then maybe there was an alignment problem in there. We tend to see this sometimes with what is defined as innovation theater. Sometimes it's like, go do this cool thing, but we're never going to scale it. So it opens up a much longer discussion, a much longer conversation about the importance of leadership within your cross-functional teams. Yeah, hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit of a perspective on that.
Definitely does, and I think the point you said at the end, right, is this is why you're kind of prescriptive about having the leaders as part of that cross-functional pan-organizational team. I have a question here from Mila from the chat. So her question is, how has Nico gotten dev teams who are not very UX/design thinking oriented to adopt this approach? Great question, Mila.
That's a great question, and we go back to cross-functionality. If we have that cross-functionality enabled within the team, it is led by invitation, and it is also led by quick education as well, which is when you have dev teams that are heavily focused on, I just want the code, that's all I want, is let's work together, take a step back, and help me look at the feasibility questions that I'm missing. So if I am a designer, if I am a product person, and we're going into a field study, and as a developer, you're kicking and screaming, saying, what am I doing here? I want to code. The question would be like, as we explore these solutions, you think about, you're the expert in AI. So actually tell me the things that you see that I'm not seeing. So it's leveraging everybody's skill set in a way that we can co-create this together. One of the best ways to encourage people is not only through invitation, but also to make sure that they're part of the team. So that actually talks about the culture and mindset that you have within your team in terms of collaborate, work together, make sure that you tackle those problems in a way that is objective towards what is the goal that I'm trying to achieve. And definitely encourage, each one to bring their own expertise onto the table.
Thank you. So Mila, if you thanks for answering the question, but Mila, if you'd like to go any deeper, feel free to post it in the chat, and I'll forward the question over to Nico again. The question that I see in the chat here from Jeff. So what are examples of assumptions that can derail a machine learning initiative? Great question.
It's like a lot of them. And one of the big assumptions, for instance, is data governance. This is a problem that a lot of times organizers tend to trip over, which is that I may assume that I have access to certain data in order to actually for my training and as input data. And that data may actually be segregated by different organizational silos that say, thou shall not touch my data, and thou shall not access it. Third-party products that might say, we just don't give you access to this particular data. So it may be challenging to actually have that specific solution be effective. A lot of times, big initiatives through AI start with actually a data strategy, so that I can leverage that. How am I organizing the data within my organization? That would be one example. Another example as well is when it comes down to the actual economics of the AI initiative, determining what the actual break-even point from an accuracy perspective is critical. And what I mean by that is that if I am creating a particular algorithm, as an example, I think it's been a little bit overused, but radiology, medical imaging analysis, there comes a point in which, unless the algorithm is at a very high accuracy, you might as well not use it. If I don't have 95 or higher accuracy perspective, I don't even want to risk it. I don't want to risk any type of the value, the impact of a false positive or false negative is so high that I don't want to even risk the fact that the machine may actually have a false positive or a false negative, my ML solution. With that in mind, is important to know that as I actually try to hit that specific accuracy, the level of costs in order to obtain that may grow exponentially. And what I mean is that I'm sure everybody's very familiar with like the diminishing returns in terms of the actual accuracy of AI. Getting to 75% accuracy can be a matter of hours. Getting to 85% accuracy can be a matter of weeks. Getting to 95 or above can be a matter of never. So that's a very interesting approach as well in terms of like, and the thorny edge cases that may drop that down. I'll stop there.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Seeing some stuff in the chat here where Xiang is weighing in on Jeff's answer a little bit too. So yeah, he's saying that there's, sometimes a simple, system might be able to accomplish the goal. So, you might be assuming that AI is part of it. And I think that this also goes right back to that shiny object thing. That early on in the innovation hype curve, right, you've got this really, really high level of inflated expectation that mean that you almost throw this tool at anything, making it so that you could, feel like it's gonna actually do what you want it to do, no matter what it is. But we by going through this experimental approach, it would make a lot more sense to essentially really narrow down what you really want it to do, and then be very confident that it's going to be possible to do it. Very, very huge on that.
Yeah, definitely. And Ashley, if I can expand on that, I can talk about a specific example. For instance, I kind of touched on the call center example, but this was a particular project that we tackled with one of our clients. And the reality is that as we went through the process, we had the idea right away. It was like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we create an NLP agent, that is listening in real time to the calls as they come in, and they're suggesting like real-time answers to everything that they're putting on the plate, so that the agent can just like answer immediately. So almost like a super agent. Interestingly enough, as we went deep into the problem space, we realized that it was more about the way they organize the data was organized, that it was creating a massive issue for agents to find things. There are many systems all over the place. They have to go to 3 different systems to figure out what the answer to the question was. And some of them had the answer and it was out of date. So rather than doing an AI initiative, what ended up being is more about, it's like, let's just organize our data and do a just basic search, solution, but just organize our data in a way that now it is browsable. Now it is accessible. So yeah, there's many different examples like this.
I love that example. And obviously we really want to do great AI, but the more important thing is just to properly solve the problem. Exactly. So with that, I guess I would allow you, do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share before we wrap up the session today?
I'll go back to let's focus on outcomes and also think about who your user is. Always keep that human-centric approach, especially in the era of AI, where we tend to think that AI will be this very dangerous solution that will just like leave every single one of us out of a job. In a lot of cases, you may actually run into opportunities to replace rather than to augment. My approach has always been resist that and focus in augmentation, because you're ultimately going to train that person to a point that you may actually level them up to a different, to a non-replaceable state. So the more we focus on judgment, on innovation, on creative solutions, the less replaceable we will become.
That was beautiful. Okay. Well, thank you very, very, very much, Nico, for a great conversation today about the AI learning sprint. And you know what, for everybody in the audience, look forward to further conversations on this topic from the AI product stream, as well as a whole bunch more great content from ACE. So check out AI.science, and looking forward to the next conversation. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Ashley. Bye, everybody.